Hi, this is Scott with the Android Guys podcast. I'm sitting here with Luke.
Hey.
What's going on, brah?
Oh, not much. Getting ready to go out of town.
Tell me more.
So every year I usually go to Gen Con. And this year, Gen Con is happening, but because of, COVID stuff and, this Delta variant stuff, I'm not going. But the group that I usually go with, we've decided to go to get like an Airbnb out of town, and we're going to just hang out for the weekend, play some board games, and hang out.
Nice.
Yeah, so
you'll attend it virtually as a group?
No, I don't think we're really even going to mess with Gen Con stuff. It's just that's what we do when we're not walking around Gen Con is we just play board games. So we're just going to take the weekend to still do that.
Do you have games that you're going to try out that you're waiting to do, or something you're going to...
There's a couple games that we're going to play that we've played before, and then there's a couple new ones. The one that I'm bringing... So we all kind of learned a game, and we're going to teach it to everybody. The one I'm doing is Lords of Waterdeep, which is like a D&D themed game, but it's more of like a political intrigue, like trying to finish these quests and get people to be on your side kind of thing. Style board game, like some territory control. Yeah.
Going to have a lot of bend the knee kind of chats with other players?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Nice. And when is that going to be?
That's Thursday, so we're recording on a Tuesday, so a couple days.
Nice.
Yeah.
Whole weekend kind of thing?
Yeah. Leave Thursday, come back Sunday kind of thing.
Right on.
Yeah.
Recharge the batteries.
A little bit, yep.
Yeah. It's one of those things for me. I didn't realize until way late into my life that if I don't recharge my batteries and kind of fill up my own glass, then I don't have enough to pour into other people.
Yep.
And that's a thing, man. It's a real thing.
And it's hard to learn that because we're so used to, at least even our culture, I think, is set up to just go, 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 go. Mm-hmm. And it's, you look at other cultures and it seems like in their work they have way more built-in holidays and time off than,
Or the idea of a 4-day week, or just the concept of what time do you get out of bed and start your work day? Like, oh, he's still asleep? Like, well, that person might be burning the midnight oil while you're asleep.
Right.
And just the concept of, stigma of self-help and taking care of yourself and doing things for you, especially as a husband or as a parent. Yeah. That's so important, man.
It really is.
It's one of those things that I don't think generationally was passed on well. I mean, anecdotally for me and also just generally, I don't think that's something we took quite seriously enough until this pandemic kind of put a magnifying glass on that.
Right. Yeah, but that's really all I got going on. How about you? Anything new and exciting?
I too am going out of town.
Oh, really?
Tomorrow.
All right.
So I'm beating you.
All right.
I win.
You win.
I'm out. I am. I have a 16th wedding anniversary coming up. And we're going to go to a little inn kind of place, cottage. We're going to stay in Connecticut.
Oh, nice. So, like a bed and breakfast kind of thing?
Yeah, kind of like that.
Okay.
It's a sleepy little town. If you watch or are familiar with Gilmore Girls, this is part of Connecticut that inspired the creator, kind of the town, the set that they wanted. Yeah. They didn't actually film there, but it's as close as you'll get to that environment.
All right.
Because they filmed, Vancouver, LA, or whatever. But this is a couple of days of getaway to kind of see and just unplug. And
nice.
Weather should be nice. I was glad to see that it actually got a little bit cooler here because I don't want to walk around super sweaty, super humid. I'm kind of looking forward to getting off the grid myself. So
yeah, dude, that'll be nice.
Yeah, we'll be back. We'll be two new dudes for the next show.
Ready to get right back into it.
Yeah, man. Speaking of which,
Yeah.
are you ready to get into this one?
Yeah, let's get into it.
We are talking about Android 5.0 today, also known as Lollipop.
Lollipop.
Luke, this is the 5th major release, Android 5.
Yes.
But, according to Wikipedia, I noticed this when I was looking up the details, this is the 12th release of Android already.
Really?
Yes. So I don't know if they qualify like a 4.1,
Yeah.
4.2 Jelly Bean as being two different ones. I'm
Sure.
assuming they do.
Yeah.
But you have 1.5, 6, 2, 2.1.
Yeah.
So they, definitely do add up quickly.
Right.
But if we're looking at, November 4, 2014, so about 6 years after the first phone came out,
Yeah.
T-Mobile G1. So 6 years, 12 releases.
It's a lot.
Yeah. But if you look at it on the calendar, we are 1 year after the last major announcement.
Yeah, so we noticed that, I think last episode we talked about they're getting more spaced out, a little bit more of a regular release schedule to fall in line with, competitors and industry standards. And they've at this point they kind of have it nailed down a little more, and it's just, either quality of life improvements or there are some major improvements, but it follows more of a yearly release schedule. That makes sense for people.
This one was bigger than I remember. This one was notable for a handful of things here, and we'll get into that. But before we do, Luke, you have the honor of putting my head back in 2014.
Yeah, so November 2014, let's go back in a time machine for a second. If you were at the movie theater in November 2014, you would have seen one of these three movies. Actually, I don't know if it was movie theater. Maybe. Anyway, the first one is Nightcrawler.
Yes, I saw that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was Jake Gyllenhaal was, trying to make a name for himself in the
independent
not crime but accident, like action news kind of thing. And the movie takes a real interesting turn. The other two were Big Hero 6.
Okay.
And then Interstellar.
Wow.
Yeah.
Those were all around that time.
Right around that time. There's even more. I mean, there were Horns. Remember that movie with Daniel Radcliffe? There were a handful of other ones.
Gotcha. Okay.
It was a big time for movies, but those were the big three right around that time. If you were at home or around the office, people were probably talking about one of these three shows. It was interesting because there wasn't a whole lot that came out in the fall, but I remember all three of these for different reasons. The first one, Mike Tyson Mysteries. It was an animated show on Adult Swim.
Oh my gosh.
You remember that?
Yep. That's one of those.
So quirky and strange. But that came out around this time.
Yeah. Okay.
The other one was Star Wars Rebels. It premiered on Disney XD. And then Jane the Virgin.
Wow.
Yeah. Started right in the fall of
I know
2014.
If you listen to every one of these episodes, we're filling in a bingo sheet.
Right.
You'll say something and I'll go, wow.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Like, oh.
That feels so old. That feels so recent.
Right.
Like, I'm sorry. If
we
you
know.
listen, yeah.
We get it.
But that's just the way I naturally react to these. When I hear it, I'm like, yeah, man, I remember that. Okay.
And then just music real quick. It was first top song in the U.S. at that time, All About That Bass. No Trouble. Meghan Trainor. And then Shake It Off by Taylor Swift. And Habits, Stay High by Tove Lo.
That's interesting because that's mentioned on the previous one, maybe not the last one, but how this is right around the age where my son starts to hear them at school and hear them in places and sing them. And I can recall him doing a couple of those at that age. Now, he would deny it today.
Well, of course.
But,
So that's the world we were living in November 2014.
All right.
So what did Lollipop bring us when it was released?
Quite a bit. The big one, and this was, the one that I think that everybody could immediately see and appreciate was this new design language.
Yes.
Called material design.
Yeah.
It was a really interesting design and approach because it felt right. It felt natural. For those who didn't get to experience it or are just really, we're just now on the end of it.
Yes.
We're starting to move into the new stuff with Android 12, but material design was something that Google employed not just for their phones, but kind of across the board. They wanted to move into this general UI kind of experience.
Right.
And it looked a lot like layers of construction paper and paper where, you would have these colors and, they had some default blues and shades that they kind of relied on that looked good together.
Yeah.
But then it was also designed to kind of work on like a grid system. The menus were nice because they would slide in from the left side. And it looked just as good on a tablet as it did on a phone. So they kind of stuck with that. A couple of episodes back, we talked about Hollow and Honeycomb and how those were, tablets were becoming a thing. And so they had to kind of make a platform that worked well for both.
Yeah.
And Chromebooks.
Right.
We started to see that with Chromebooks too. So do you remember much about when material design was introduced?
A little bit. I think the thing that I remember about it is it made everything feel familiar. You could look at something, whether it was on a tablet or a Chromebook or a phone, and go, oh, that's Google.
Yeah. Or if you were in one, you already knew how to get around the next one.
Yeah.
Like a calendar or your Gmail menus and things. They just kind of felt like, oh, I know where to go for this.
Yeah.
I liked it. I thought that at the time it was really cool to see that even like if you just kind of poked around the developer site as somebody who's, not a developer, I would see lots of little things that I could appreciate what they were trying to do for developers to make it so that they could adopt this, language with color schemes and gradients and complementary colors and palettes and all of these things that were, these colors have always existed, but just the way that they presented them, it was a cool look. And it was unlike anything really that I expected, and only being a few releases from the Hollow UI, it was a radical departure.
Yeah.
It was, we went away from this like futuristic kind of laser colors and things to, hey, this is like paper.
Right.
I loved it.
Yeah.
And I know that, they did their best to kind of make it so that other apps would take advantage of it. I don't think we ended up anywhere near their goal.
No.
And I don't even think Google did a great job of blanketing their own apps and making it so consistent. There were still like an occasional straggler where you're like, this doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
It was also a point that I do remember feeling like apps kind of had like a before and after point.
Yes.
When you saw something that was before material design, you look at it and go, oh yeah, I remember when apps used to look like this.
Right.
And I remember that old, like, this was nice. We put up with this.
Yeah.
But anything after that was kind of like, oh, this feels a little bit more modern, a little bit more intentional.
Well, and I think it also helped, going back to what you're saying about if you're on a new device or in a new area, things are familiar. Mm-hmm. When material design was implemented in some of the third-party apps, it was like, oh, I'm getting the same experience across my phone no matter what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And that was the nice feeling.
Yeah.
So
jumping ahead to future devices and software, that was one of the big things that I came to recognize and feel like when Google came out with the Pixel line of phones mm-hmm. and what they were doing with Android.
Yep.
Really felt cohesive mm-hmm. and felt intentional.
Yeah.
Where up until, even with material design, they feel like they're getting close. They're getting warmer.
Right.
But we haven't found the hot spot yet.
Right.
So that's material design. One of the other things, and I don't want to just gloss over this because there are a lot of features
sure.
in Android 5 or in Lollipop that are worth talking about, but the Android runtime, ART, mm-hmm. was adopted. So what that did was, and we saw this with pretty much, past and, going forward and even today, it's always optimized to give you more battery mm-hmm. and kind of boost the performance. Mm-hmm. But this was one that I remember kind of picking up some chatter that developers really liked that because it was just a departure from the just-in-time
yes.
stuff that was, prior.
Yeah.
So this one had quite a few features that were introduced that are still around today and are also kind of, again, we take for granted sometimes that, we could do these things.
Right.
That maybe up until this point we could not do, or maybe a few straggling devices would introduce this mm-hmm. and go, here's a reason to buy our device, where this kind of says, okay, well, anything that has this software going forward is able to do this.
Right.
So we'll just kind of start at the top here. This had a new lock screen that, we had started to see the introduction of widgets.
Yes.
And this took them away.
Yeah.
And you had the ability to kind of toggle or decide what you wanted to display on that lock screen.
Right.
Because up until then, it was a lot of just all or nothing.
Yeah.
Do you want to see your messages? Do you want to see your email? Do you want to see, your notification that you received the payment in PayPal?
Yeah.
Or, those things were just out there.
Yeah.
So you can decide if you want to hide that.
Yeah.
Which is kind of easy to kind of understate the importance of that.
Well, and you had the option to only show certain things from mm-hmm. it. If it was a PayPal, money received, it would just say money received, not mm-hmm. X amount received. So you still got the notification, but it hid some messages. Or if it's a text, mm-hmm. Text from wife, but it doesn't say what it is.
Right. Or you have X new messages.
Right.
Gmail or whatever. Battery saver mode.
Mm-hmm.
This one feels like it. I don't know why it didn't exist all along.
Yeah.
We're always trying to squeeze out more battery out of our phone.
Well, yeah, I think probably thinking back to this time, this was when there was kind of a little bit of, between the big players, between Android and iOS, was multitasking and some of that, we can do this all day. Mm-hmm. And so I think, the battery saver mode was a little bit of the, hey, we're going to give you this too, so that you can do all this stuff all day and then automatically, be set up so that it's no surprise your phone's just all of a sudden dead. Mm-hmm. It gives you these notifications, says, hey, battery saver mode, do you want to turn off your Wi-Fi? Do you want to turn off your Bluetooth? Mm-hmm. Those kind of things.
It's a feature that my son used and mm-hmm. still uses, mm-hmm. That he opts in because he's not one to just kind of charge throughout the day. His work style and lifestyle don't allow for that.
Right.
Maybe the drive to and from places here and there, but I work at a desk. in an office, so I can plug in whenever I want. I can charge pretty much everywhere I go.
Right.
But for people who are out and about, that's a pain point for years.
Yeah.
I love this phone and all these cool things I can do, but I hate that this thing's dead by the time I go home. Yeah. So this battery saver mode, it doesn't look nice.
No.
But the point of it is to kind of strip down all the non-essential functions and features to say, okay, if you need to use this as a phone, you can, and you'll get, they promised extra 90 minutes, so that would turn off certain things, set the brightness down, and really just kind of squeeze life out of it. So what else you got here?
So there was a do not disturb, or a priority mode was implemented. So it was, I can turn on do not disturb, but if I get a call from this number, it still rings through.
Yeah.
Which seems like one of those things that really it was up until their fifth major release that we had this, because it's one of those features that just seems like it's been part of our phones forever.
Yeah. Like, how is it that it's always been, until this point, all or nothing?
Right.
Like, no, I just, I want to go to bed at night, and I want it to not just ring with texts and calls, but if mom calls, it's going to ring.
Right. And my wife uses do not disturb a lot, and I haven't really implemented it, and it's really nice. I see the benefits of it. It's just one of those things that I haven't set up because I just trained myself to always, not want to miss anything on my phone.
Yeah.
You think you're not, but you really don't, because, you look, and after 9 o'clock, I haven't gotten any texts or calls from anybody.
Yeah.
So what does it matter?
And the apps let us go in and make different adjustments today too.
Sure.
So it's kind of a composite experience, but to, for some people I know, they, their phone never rings out loud. Their phone is always on silent. And that's just interesting to me because I'm not used to that.
Yeah.
I have to hear mine ring, but yeah, so that gives somebody, or gave people, the ability to kind of decide if people were able to kind of get through the wall, that you kind of build up.
Yeah.
Trusted devices.
Oh, yeah.
That was introduced here. I like that feature.
I do too.
And it was the first couple of times that it would pop up for me in the real world when reviewing a phone or using it or whatever, would recognize, maybe a specific speaker or watch or something that would say, do you want to add this as a trusted device?
Yeah.
And what that really allows for is, if your phone is able to detect that, then it would be okay to kind of bypass the lock screen or the security of the PIN, because you're in a place that was trusted.
Right.
So if I was connected to a certain Bluetooth speaker at home, then it would not ask me to put in the PIN every time.
Right.
And that's just a nice quality of life.
It is. Yeah. It just that's just a little change that just really just made everything easier as you're going about. You don't have to always mess with settings.
Yep.
But they also gave you the ability to search within settings then also. So if you're like, oh, hey, this isn't a trusted device. Where's this setting? How do I get to this? How do I do that? You can find things, or, how do I change where do I go for my battery saver settings?
How do I know if I have the latest version of the software? How do I check for my IMEI number? There's ways to do it that you can just go through the menu, but being able to search for a word,
to it.
Finger, and it would, all the different options for fingerprint.
Right.
Or if you needed to adjust your keyboard settings, you can do that through your settings instead of going into the keyboard app.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. And I've always liked that. Yeah. It's kind of a cheat.
It is. A lot of apps will ask for permissions too, and you can, without having to go, if you skip that for now, or you say no, then you go into the app and you're like, oh, wait, if it wants to do something, I need to give microphone access. Well, what else has microphone access? And then you can search and, just type in microphone, and it'll pull up all your, settings for accessing the microphone. It's really nice.
Yep.
The next thing we have, I don't know if I've actually ever used.
Same.
Guest mode.
Same.
So
I could appreciate it.
Yeah.
And seeing it demonstrated was kind of like that makes sense.
Yeah.
Especially if I want to hand my phone to my kid while I'm driving.
Right.
Or let somebody kind of use it for a little bit.
I don't live, my life is not one that I would really need to let anybody ever use my phone.
Yeah.
I can see if there's a situation of, every once in a while you get that person that's like, hey, can I use your phone? Mine's dead or something like that. And then, if I turn that on real quick,
here,
give it to you,
don't go looking through my pictures.
Exactly. Yeah. Or, look at my other calls or my contact list or something. But I've never had to use it. I've never been in a situation to even have turned it on to my phone.
Yeah.
But if you have, so listener, as you're listening, if you've used it, send us a message or something. Let us know how you use it, because I'm sure there's things we're not thinking of.
Yeah. Did you use it at this time?
Yeah.
Or do you have a different solution today?
Yeah.
For that type of situation? So if you want to contact us, you can do that at podcast@AndroidGuys.com, and that'll reach us, and we can see what you say.
Next thing on here, enhanced quick settings. So you can display the brightness slide. There's flashlights.
Yeah, it changed the way you could kind of go in and just make a couple adjustments on the fly,
right,
without having to dive into the full
menus
of settings. Yeah, so they really kind of, and they've always had kind of like this wealth of like agency over your phone.
Yeah.
But it's, where do I go for these things? And some of these things were as simple as, well, we're just going to, so you can drop down your notification bar and quickly toggle that. That was a great improvement, but this kind of enhanced that to make it even better, to say, oh yeah, actually I know that I have this adaptive brightness, but I really want to dial it up because I want to see it. I know it's in a dim room. And I saw this is a kind of a tangential story, but on the Cinemark app, when you purchase your tickets, you get the QR code.
Yeah.
A lot of times I would go to the theater, and my phone, I have it set up so that at like 10 o'clock, the blue light kind of dials down. It becomes a night mode.
Sure.
And it had always kind of struggled with them trying to scan that.
Sure.
And it would kind of dial down brightness. Where now with the app, when you order tickets, it automatically, when you look at it, it turns the brightness of your phone all the way up.
Interesting.
As soon as I purchased the tickets, it was at a dark room the other night, and I noticed that because my wife noticed it.
Yeah.
She's on the other side of the room, and I ordered tickets for a movie, and as soon as I, confirmed to see it, it just lit up. She's like, "What are you doing over there?" And she's like, the whole side of the room lit up. I was like, that was the app itself.
Interesting. So, that's cool.
Yeah, the enhanced or the improved quick settings that gave you the ability to kind of do that. So before you would hand somebody your phone, or if you wanted to play a game and you really wanted to see the detail, you can dial that stuff up to the detriment of your battery.
Sure.
If you wanted, or if you wanted to turn off some things to extend the battery.
Right.
A couple other features that were nice, like notifications if you're playing a game.
Yeah.
They were nice because they would kind of like pop over your screen.
Yeah.
And you had the ability to take action if you wanted to, but it didn't kind of like fill up that row.
Yeah.
That notification bar that's been there since
right.
day one, but it felt smarter and felt like less invasive for them to do that.
The other thing is the OK G.
Yeah. How do we talk about that here without triggering it in the office?
Yeah.
Are triggering or calling on your smart assistant, powered by Google, that is a quick phrase.
Yeah.
That if we say it here, we're going to turn on your things at home.
Right. But that was in 5, in Lollipop, that update, it was everywhere. You could use it even when it was turned off.
Yeah. And that was a
Weird.
really nice thing.
Yeah.
It's also one of those, if you're easy to kind of buy into conspiracy theories
Sure.
and kind of like, I know my phone's always listening to me.
Right.
And they'll tell you that it's only designed to hear this, otherwise it doesn't listen.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's what gives you the ability to ask it a question or make a call or to do anything like that without having to worry about, unlocking your phone and going into the search app, or to, depending on what phone you have, how you would trigger the Google search.
Right.
So that was an interesting one. That is right around the time where we, start to see smart speakers.
Yes.
We're still 2014, so we haven't quite hit that Google Home, Google Mini, but this is kind of what opens the door to that, like
Right.
always listening kind of thing. And the last thing that I have is kind of another quality of life, at a glance data usage.
Yes.
Because we're at a point now where 4G is pretty predominant. So
And we're doing a lot more on our phones. A lot more streaming is happening now.
And you want to be able to go in and actually just see quickly, whoa, dude,
Right.
look how much your Snapchat's using.
Yes.
You might want to connect to Wi-Fi a little bit more often.
You're watching a whole lot of YouTube.
Yep. And those are actual conversations that I had with my son, because he didn't realize,
Yep.
He's like, but what about music? And, that's a whole education thing of, you can do music, you can do movies, but here's how quickly, and here's how you can go to check it. You can see today and kind of keep an eye on. So if you had a meter to plan, or only had so much that you had to share,
Right.
this was, at that point, that was a conversation of, well, we've only got 10 gigabytes to share as a family. Let's take it easy. So that was, that was a nice one. Those are pretty much, feature-wise, all I have for Android 5. But, that was a fun one.
Yeah, there's some big things in there.
Yeah.
But it also didn't really feel that big at the time.
Yeah.
Like the material design was the biggest, look wise that this is a new thing. It's a new look, but as you got into it, it's the same Android that we've been using for a couple years now, with some nice quality of life improvements and some cool things that we were like, oh, I didn't realize I liked that or needed it, but I have it.
Yep. You want to take a quick break, and we'll come back and talk about hardware?
Yeah, it sounds like a plan.
All right, coming up after the break, we'll talk about a phone that launched with Android 5, as well as a tablet. And we're still at a point where tablets are a thing. It's a little different today.
Yes.
But yeah, we'll talk about two devices that launched with Lollipop. First, Luke, let's thank our friends at Blue.
Yeah.
They hooked us up with some new equipment.
Yeah. You can hear our sultry voices.
Yeah. Our dulcet tones.
Yeah.
In all seriousness, they reached out and offered to send us some new equipment.
Yep.
And I had been using a Yeti caster for a while. We had been making do with another Blue microphone that had kind of gone back and forth to the office and has seen better days physically. But thanks to them, man. They hooked it up. We've got two Yeti casters here. When we get into the video format of these shows, you guys will see that. But sitting here at a desk and hands free, put the mics where we want, and we don't have to mess with trying to balance things. It's really, really cool stuff.
It is.
So
it's very nice.
Thanks, Blue.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, we'll be back in a moment. We're back.
Hey, yeah, we are back.
Hey, how long were we gone?
Oh, you'll never know.
We'll tell you if you ask.
All right.
Email us, podcast@AndroidGuys.com. We'll tell you how long we're gone between breaks. It's a while.
Yeah.
But I can't tell you how long.
Yeah, unless you ask.
Unless you ask.
So, yeah, we're talking about Android 5.0 Lollipop. And now we're to the point where we're talking about the devices that were released with Lollipop.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is a phone. We are talking about the Motorola Nexus 6.
Interesting, right?
Right.
We were just talking about before the break, or during the break, this being the first Motorola phone to kind of get the Google back scratch.
Right.
And it came at an interesting time. Motorola had just kind of hit upon an idea of creating phones that were aimed at the right demographic. Mm-hmm. They weren't going after these like high-end users.
Right.
But their flagship line, the Moto X, gave you the ability to kind of go in and create a physical device experience that was unique to you.
Right.
And you could kind of change the back colors, the trim, the buttons. You could even change the material on some of those. And it had a very distinct, of the time kind of, I created one.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I was really, a really big fan because it felt like it was my phone.
Right. Yeah.
It was the exact color combination that I wanted. But that was not present with the Nexus 6.
No.
It just looked a lot like that Motorola of the day.
Yeah.
Once in a while, you'll get a phone that just kind of, like today's Pixel line has its own design language.
Sure.
It doesn't look like really any other phones.
Right.
You might look at that and go, well, the camera, the way that's laid out, looks a little like this.
Sure.
There's only so many ways you can do that.
Right.
But there's nothing really that looks like, the forthcoming Pixel 6.
Right.
You could usually look at a phone and go, oh, that's obviously this brand.
Right.
And at that time, that's what this Motorola phone was.
Yeah.
It was a cool phone.
Yeah.
I really liked it, and it was just, I'm always a fan of trying a new brand, new endeavor.
Yeah.
With a new version of Android.
Yep.
It always, the question for me is, how intentional or cohesive does this feel?
Right.
Does it feel like the phone maker worked with the software maker?
Right.
And at this time, they were not. It's not under the same house.
Right.
But the Nexus 6, we moved pretty quickly away from, like the 4 and the 5. Mm-hmm. Some of those predecessors were that, hey, you don't have to drop $700 on a phone.
Right.
You can get a really nice experience, stock Android, all the best of Google for $350, $400.
Yeah.
Not the Nexus 6.
Not anymore, everybody.
Goodbye.
Welcome to the real world.
32 gigabyte model.
Yeah.
And 64 gigabyte.
650 and 700.
Yeah.
That's a lot of...
That's a big ask.
A lot of wampum. Yeah. That was a lot of money compared to what we were, kind of getting used to for a clean OS, so to speak.
And again, the Nexus has always been one of those not readily available, not at all carriers per se, not this huge ad campaign around the device. It's more around the software.
Right.
So here, it's, again, kind of did themselves a disservice, I think, maybe even with the benefit of hindsight, of moving that needle.
Yeah.
Maybe a little too early.
Yeah, I think it maybe put some people off slightly. It's one of those, I can't get this from my carrier necessarily, so how do I justify spending that much if it's not being subsidized somewhere?
And T-Mobile not long before this was really what, kind of exposed the price of phones. Mm-hmm. Prior to the change in the industry, everything was 2-year contracts in the United States.
Yep.
Some places even did 3.
Yep.
So these phones that people would buy, they would think this is just a $200 phone. There's actually a $600-$700 phone.
Right.
But your carrier says, hey, we will eat this much of it as long as you agree to be with us for a couple of years.
Right. As long as you agree to pay us this much per month.
Yeah. So
for this much time.
When T-Mobile said, well, we're not going to do contracts anymore, and people had to start buying their phone, it kind of exposed the price of phones.
Yeah. Everybody was just like, oh my gosh, that's how much phones are?
Yeah. And Motorola did a good job of coming in with their Moto X, but then they also had the Moto G series and Moto E series, which were like 150, 250. And if it's able to do everything I need, then why do I need to spend?
Right.
So I was really hoping to stay at that point.
Right.
And when we go to the $600-$700 phones, it's really hard to tell people you got to get the Nexus 6 over anything else that's on the market.
Sure.
So, hardware-wise, tell me a little bit about...
hardware-wise, it as you look at what these specs are, you're going, okay, 650, 700 is really not that bad for what you're getting, because it was some cool stuff. So, the processor was a Qualcomm SD805, which is a 2.7 gig quad-core processor. That was great.
Yeah.
And then you pair it with 3 gigs of RAM.
Yep. And I mean, we're still in Qualcomm's processors are still in the 800 series. I mean, we're now up in the 800, 880s. But from around the year prior to this, at this point, if your phone had a Qualcomm 800 something, you knew that it had a pretty beefy processor.
Yep.
So at 805, 2.7 gigahertz, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, especially with 3 gigs of RAM, because up to now we'd really been looking at 2 for the most part. So it bumped that up, and then it had a 3,220 milliamp battery with wireless charging built in. So it has all of these, flagship phone features.
Yeah.
Nice big screen.
Yeah, they built it as a 6. But technically, it came in at 5.96, which for all practical purposes is 6.
Is a 6-inch screen.
But it was the resolution.
Yeah, was incredible. 2560 by 1440.
Which is
QHD,
and double that of what somebody who might have a 1080 or a 720 pixel screen. This starts to get interesting because we're still seeing that in screens today. As to whether people can see that is debatable.
Yeah.
But where it really gets practical is moving into VR.
Yes.
When you have Google goggles or Daydream, VR, you start to get into you're looking at these things up close.
Real close.
And that's where the pixels really start to matter.
Yeah. I can't remember if this is the point of the industry where we were looking at things like Apple having their Retina displays. I can't remember if this was kind of a way to have a foot in that market, because I remember that was a big thing, was the Retina display, or this super high pixel density screen. And this is the first one that we're seeing with this size in Android.
Yep.
Other than that, I mean, the camera again was huge. A 13 megapixel rear camera. I mean, that was, we all know now that megapixel doesn't necessarily matter, but for a 13 megapixel to be on a phone was that was unheard of. But then also on the other side of that, a 2 megapixel for your front camera.
Yeah,
was just kind of like, wait a second.
Oh, you guys forgot.
You run out of money?
Had to throw one on the way out the door.
Right.
Hey, put a front-facing camera on there.
Right. But this phone was good, and it was received well.
Mm-hmm. And Motorola at that time was really sticking to what we call stock Android, and then they would put a few other like extras on there,
sure,
like the ability to kind of do a little chop motion if you want to bring up the flashlight, or double tap the power button to bring up a camera, or flip your wrist a couple times, to wake up the camera.
Sure.
So those were nice, and those features don't slow down upgrade cycles.
No.
They don't get in the way of, we have to completely overhaul everything to look like this. So I think in hindsight, this was a good move for Motorola to kind of experiment and see, and kind of commit to that stock Android experience here. And I love it. I don't want to call it a purist where it's either that or nothing.
Sure.
But I like it because I'm able to move from one to the next without having to relearn.
Yeah.
Where certain brands will tuck things behind different layers of menus.
Right.
But I liked the Motorola Nexus 6. This was not one that I spent too much time with.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of what I was carrying at that time, but I remember getting something quickly afterwards because I wanted the material design.
Right.
And that was like, well, I don't know that I want to drop that kind of money on the Motorola. Another interesting thing about the Nexus 6, and we'll move on, is that a few months after this phone came out, Google started to do its Project Fi.
Yes.
And if it's no longer considered Project, but that was the service that you could use that would be use T-Mobile and Sprint and later U.S. Cellular and Wi-Fi to kind of hop around and give you the best connection available.
Right.
This was the only phone that was certified at launch to be a Project Fi handset.
Yeah.
So that is a place to go to buy phones still today.
Yeah.
If you're looking for something like that. But the support for Project Fi is much wider now, especially as unlocked devices continue to permeate and universally unlocked devices specifically. But yeah, that was the Nexus 6. Anything else you want to talk about there?
No.
Talk about the tablet.
All right. The tablet was the HTC Nexus 9.
HTC still a thing.
Yep.
At that time.
Yep.
I liked this tablet.
I don't know if I actually had a chance to spend time with it.
I think this was my first real time with, now that I think about material design, I think this is what I really got to know it with. It was a nice device. I thought it was kind of like it felt right. In terms of hardware, it felt nice to be back to HTC. I've always liked their build quality. This one was offered in 16 gigabyte storage and 32, and it was priced $400 and $480.
Yeah.
So still an iPad world.
Yep.
And also at this point, it's a Kindle kind of world too.
Yep.
Where you could, if you're going to spend money on something, iPad generally was where people went.
Sure.
But if you're like, I just need something, Kindle was a really affordable option because it did pretty much everything. You just didn't have the Google Suite, which was not a problem for people who know their way around devices and just the internet itself.
Sure.
But this had an 8.9-inch screen.
Yep.
2048 by 1536, so it was a nice resolution. 9-inch screen for me is a pretty sweet spot.
Yeah.
You know, we've talked about how 7 and 8 tend to feel nice for magazines and books and kind of passive lean back media consumption.
Right.
9 inches was, you know, you're getting more without feeling like you're carrying around a lunch tray.
Right.
You know, a big slab.
Right.
2.3 gigahertz processor. This had the NVIDIA Tegra K1.
Yeah.
So they were still making processors at that point for devices. They would not be for much longer.
Right.
But still at 2.3 gigahertz paired with 2 gigs of RAM, pretty much all anybody needs.
Yeah, it did everything you needed to do in ample time.
Well, and like we talked about in a previous episode, the software was designed to run on much less hardware.
Yeah.
You remember the project's Velt was like, let's make this so that it can run smoothly without requiring much hardware.
Right.
So we just happened to be getting more hardware.
Right.
You know, and material design didn't add too much bloat. I don't remember that being much of an issue with performance at that point. Rounded out here, we had 8 megapixel rear, 1.6 megapixel front camera, 6,700 milliamp hour battery.
That's a big battery.
It is. It's weird to think about now that some phones are starting to sneak into that.
Yeah.
You know, like you may find like the rare Chinese manufacturer that has this pack you can add on or, you know, extended battery that you can snap on to get into like 6,000 and 10,000 on a phone. But this is a good amount. I remember that I felt like I could use my tablet as long as I wasn't just carrying it around watching YouTube videos all day. It was more than enough for me to do emails and messaging and kind of just use it as a productivity tool.
Right.
Luke, have you ever been a tablet person?
Yeah. So I've used I used a Kindle for a while. I used a Fire tablet for a while. I've had a couple iPads. I like tablets. Now I find myself with the size that, you know, most devices are now. I rarely have a need for a tablet anymore. But I do find if I'm looking at like one thing that I love using on tablet is Comixology.
Yes.
To read comics. It just something about it feels just so nice.
Yep.
And books are great to read on in PDFs. I do a lot of like board gaming and Dungeons and Dragons and stuff. And there's a lot of PDFs that are associated with those different games. It's nice to have those everywhere. I can carry around all the books I need in a tablet versus, you know, carrying all the books.
Yeah.
But yeah, generally in everyday use, I don't use a tablet much.
I'm along the same line. I kind of liken it to Android Wear and Wear OS. Wearables. I'm okay without.
Yep.
And I always kind of like getting back into it. And I'll go through phases where I'm like, oh, I really like this.
Right.
And I'm charging this thing and keeping it, you know, so that in the living room, I reach under the coffee table and I grab the tablet instead of my Chromebook because here I want to kind of consume things. But when it comes to, I'm going to reply to some email messages, do a little bit of catching up on things. I need a physical keyboard.
Right.
You know, that's kind of where I think I get lost with tablets. But yeah, you're right. When it comes to comics and reading and PDFs of magazines and things like that, I think that tablets are just much better for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a kind of a whole thing that's changed. We've kind of come, I don't want to say come and gone, but tablets are its own thing, and now Chromebooks and 2-in-1s and, you know, even like with the Surface and some of that, you know, that has changed
Yeah.
User, how people use their devices.
Right.
And stylus, that's
Yeah.
where the Galaxy Note and some of those LG Stylo let you use that type of thing for markups. And,
Right.
So tablets still are a thing.
Yeah.
But I just don't know. I'd love to take a look at a current breakdown of market share and models and to see.
Yeah, just more of what are people doing on tablets?
Yeah.
What's the main purchase point for a tablet? I'd be interested to know that also.
Yeah. Luke, I don't have anything else here.
No.
Hardware wise to add. Do you?
No. I mean, it was a good tablet at the time.
Mm-hmm. I think that'll do it here for the show then.
Yeah.
Cool. This was the Android 5.0 Lollipop discussion. If you happen to get into an Uber today and your driver was playing us in the car and you're like, hey, driver, don't turn that off. That was really interesting. What was that you were listening to? It's the Android Guys podcast.
Yeah.
You can find all the previous versions of Android. We did a deep dive into those, and we'll go all the way up through Android 12 when it releases here. It's available, but we will give it one of these types of treatments probably in the next 4 to 6 weeks, I'm guessing. So my name is Scott.
And I'm Luke.
And this is Android Guys Podcast. If you have any questions or feedback, if we said something and you're wringing your fingers because you know we screwed it up, or you want to add to the conversation, shoot us a message, email us podcast@AndroidGuys.com. Until next time, see ya.
See ya.